Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we are unpacking a life story marked by, well, unparalleled musical genius and really deep personal turmoil, the life and career of Amy Jade Winehouse.
Hmm.
And this deep dive, I think it's necessary because when you really dig into the raw source material, her story isn't just, a simple list of songs and struggles. It's a study in extremes.
Exactly. Born in London, 1983, and tragically gone in 2011,
Uh,
at that infamous age, 27.
right.
And when we navigate the sources, the dichotomy, that split in her existence, it's just so stark. She was this English singer, songwriter, a cultural icon of the 21st century, known everywhere for that voice,
Yeah.
that distinctive deep contralto voice.
Unmistakable.
And those lyrics, so autobiographical, plus this truly eclectic sound she had.
And the scale of her success, it needs context. I mean, we're talking about an artist who sold over 30 million records worldwide.
In such a short time, too.
Right, in a very short span. And won 6 Grammy Awards, 5 of those, unbelievably, in a single night.
Yeah, incredible.
So our mission today is really to cut through the noise, navigate that huge critical acclaim set against the intense personal struggle, and strictly, stick to the sources, extracting the key chronological and thematic points that define her complexity. We want to understand the music, the persona, and ultimately the tragedy.
And to really appreciate the scope of her art, I think we first need to define her core territory.
Hey.
It's soul, yeah, but more specifically, it's blue-eyed soul, neo-soul, R&B.
Mm.
And crucially, that jazz foundation, that blending, that mix, that's really what made her unique. It set her apart from almost everyone else in the early 2000s music scene.
Okay, so let's unpack this beginning then. She was raised in London, Jewish parents, her father Mitch, a taxi driver, and her mother Janice, a pharmacist. But those deep roots of her revolutionary sound, they came straight from the family tree, didn't they?
Oh, absolutely. The source material really highlights this powerful, almost professional connection to jazz on both sides of her family.
Really, both sides.
Yeah. Her maternal uncles were professional jazz musicians. So that's a direct link, to the technical side of the genre.
Okay.
And perhaps even more fascinating is the connection through her paternal grandmother, Cynthia. She'd been a singer herself and had dated the legendary English jazz saxophonist Ronnie Scott.
Wow, Ronnie Scott. That's significant. I mean, he was a giant of the British jazz scene.
Exactly. So you see, she wasn't just listening to jazz records at home. She was immersed in this family history where jazz was tangible, it was real. It was the profession of her relatives and their social circle.
So it was in her blood, almost literally.
Precisely. And those influences, combined with her father singing Frank Sinatra songs to her, well, that provided the soundtrack to her childhood. It shaped her early interest in the Great American Songbook.
Which explains her foundational training, I guess. She attended the Susie Earnshaw Theater School for, 4 years?
4 years, yeah.
Yeah.
Working on her vocals and even learning tap dance, which kind of speaks to a commitment to full performance training from early on.
And she didn't just train in performance. She went on to the Sylvia Young Theater School. And while, there were those tabloid rumors about her being expelled at 14,
Right, I remember those.
the school founder and her dad, Mitch, they both denied those claims pretty strongly.
Mm-hmm.
What's fascinating here, though, is that even an English teacher at Sylvia Young recognized her writing gift, predicted she might become a novelist or journalist.
Wow.
That detail, it feels like a crucial precursor to the sharp, observational, and frankly, ruthlessly autobiographical lyrical style that would later define her music.
She was a wordsmith first. You can really see that. And by age 14, she bought her own guitar, started actively writing music. But she didn't rush the process of becoming, a star.
No.
Her early career involved some real hustle. She actually worked as an entertainment journalist for the World Entertainment News Network.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. And around 2000, she became the featured female vocalist with the National Youth Jazz Orchestra.
Okay, that NYJO work, that feels vital. It wasn't just jamming, right? This was rigorous professional vocal work.
Absolutely. And the sources tell us she was practicing seriously at home, too, learning the catalogs of giants like Dinah Washington, Sarah Vaughan, and, of course, Frank Sinatra. Singers who she said, and I love this phrase, will get under the song.
Get under the song. What does that mean to you? What was she getting at?
I think it means she wasn't just performing the notes on the page. She was inhabiting the emotional core, the story, the subtext. She was remaking the standard as her own, finding the truth in it for herself.
That makes sense.
And it was that dedication, that unique vocal style, that led to her discovery. Her best friend, the soul singer Tyler James, actually sent her demo tape to an A&R scout.
Ah, so that's how it happened. And she signed with Simon Fuller's 19 Management in 2002. They famously kept her sort of a recording industry secret for a time.
Yeah, for a bit. While she was regularly performing jazz standards in small venues like the Cobden Club, it seems like it was a deliberate strategy. Build anticipation, make sure her first official release landed with maximum impact.
And it clearly worked. She secured a deal with Island Records, a crucial publishing deal with EMI, which kicked off that working relationship with producer Salam Raimi. He was instrumental to her debut, wasn't he?
Absolutely. Foundational.
And that debut album, Frank, arrived in 2003, predominantly jazz-influenced, as we said, and she co-wrote nearly every song on it, minus a couple of covers.
Right.
The critical reception was just overwhelmingly positive, praising the cool, critical bass in her lyrics. Her voice immediately drew comparisons to jazz greats like Sarah Vaughan, but also more contemporary, unconventional voices like Macy Gray.
And the accolades came quickly. The album was nominated for the UK's Mercury Prize. It achieved platinum sales.
Platinum on debut, wow.
Yeah. And the single Stronger Than Me won her an Ivor Novello Award for Best Contemporary Song. So this confirms she was an established critical success right out of the gate, totally grounded in technical skill and that unique voice.
But here's where we get that crucial insight into her artistic integrity. Linking back to what we were saying about control, she later admitted she was, quote, only 80% behind the album.
Yeah, that quote is telling.
Because Island Records apparently overruled her preferences for certain songs and mixes.
And what's fascinating there is that even with all that critical success, platinum sales, she still felt creatively compromised.
Right.
That feeling, that 20% controlled by the label, you have to think that became the catalyst, or at least part of it, for the radical shift in sound that defined her next project. She was clearly an artist who needed absolute control over the final product.
Yeah, that dissatisfaction with Frank, it really seems to have pushed her into a new direction.
Yeah.
And the sources show this deliberate, quite sharp pivot away from the pure jazz influence toward the sound of like 1950s and 1960s girl groups. Which brings us, of course, to the international phenomenon that was Back to Black.
And this shift, it wasn't just aesthetic. It required a whole new set of collaborators, a new structure. She hired the New York soul band, the Dap Kings.
Oh, yeah, the Dap Kings. Great band.
Fantastic band for backing in the studio and on the road. And that lent this immediate, authentic vintage sound to the project. The whole 11-track album was completed in just 5 months.
5 months. That's incredibly fast for an album like that.
Incredibly fast, with production duties split between Salam Raimi, who she'd worked with before, and Mark Ronson.
Ah, the Ronson collaboration. Iconic now. But the sources, they paint a very human picture of how they started out, don't they?
They really do.
Yeah.
She was famously blunt when she disliked his work, apparently.
I can imagine.
But she also initially thought he was just like a sound engineer. She was expecting some older, maybe bearded jazz traditionalist, not this young DJ producer guy.
That tells you everything, doesn't it? About her intense focus on the sound, not the celebrity or the producer's reputation. She was all business when it came to the music.
Totally. Ronson noted her directness, yeah, but he also realized pretty quickly her vision was just impeccable.
And we circle back to that need for artistic control and also that need for real-world validation. Her father, Mitch Winehouse, shared that amazing anecdote about her playing newly recorded tracks on a CD in his taxi outside the studio.
Yeah, the taxi test. I love that story. It's incredibly insightful.
Why do you think she did that? What was the point?
Well, remember, she'd been disappointed by how Island Records mixed Frank. She felt it was maybe too glossy, too studio-bound.
Okay.
So by playing the tracks in her dad's cab, the way most people, the average listener, would actually hear them, she was ensuring the fidelity, the emotional punch, survived the real-world environment.
Like a quality control check.
Exactly. It was her final, non-corporate approval step, making sure the music sounded raw, live, honest, just as she intended it.
Well, the public definitely listened. Back to Black came out in October 2006, and it wasn't just a hit album, it became a cultural moment.
Oh, completely. It quickly achieved massive international success, eventually sold over 20 million copies worldwide.
20 million?
Yeah, and became one of the best-selling albums in UK history. It was the UK's best-selling album of 2007, sold something like 1.85 million copies just that year alone.
Just staggering numbers. And the lead single, Rehab, it just exploded, didn't it?
Exploded, reached the top 10 in both the UK and the US. Time magazine called it the best song of 2007, praising her originality, her confidence.
And that song in particular, it perfectly synthesized the genius and the personal tragedy, didn't it? Delivered with that sort of mouthy, funny, sultry swagger that critics just adored.
Absolutely. And the album just kept delivering hits. You Know I'm No Good.
Loved that one, especially the Ghostface Killer remix.
Yeah, great remix. The title track, Back to Black, which gave the album its distinctive, really melancholy tone. Tears Dry on Their Own, Love is a Losing Game.
So many classics on one record.
And she also contributed those distinct vocals to Mark Ronson's single, Valerie, which became a huge UK hit in its own right, peaked at #2.
Right, the Zootons cover.
Exactly. But the true, undeniable international zenith, the absolute peak, came in 2008 with the Grammy Awards.
Ah, yes.
She won 5 Grammys in one night, which tied the record for a female artist at the time that was massive, and she became the first British woman ever to achieve 5 Grammys in a single ceremony.
And crucially, she swept 3 of the 4 major general categories, which is incredibly rare. Best New Artist, Record of the Year, and Song of the Year, both for Rehab, plus Best Pop Vocal Album for Back to Black.
It was just total domination. But what makes that moment even more iconic and kind of poignant is the performance environment.
Right. She wasn't even there in L.A., was she?
No, she couldn't be. Her visa approval hadn't been processed in time, apparently because of her burgeoning personal issues and legal trouble.
So she performed via satellite from London.
Yeah. And that contrast, winning the absolute highest awards in music while literally being barred from entering the country that hosted the awards, it perfectly encapsulated that dichotomy, that split we talked about earlier, success and struggle side by side.
And she ended her acceptance speech for Record of the Year with that really resonant reference to the Camden Market fire that had happened recently, linking her success back to her roots.
Yeah, this is for London, because Camden Town ain't burning down.
Such a powerful moment.
It really solidified her as this global force, but still deeply connected to her home. And it speaks volumes about the lasting impact that Back to Black was later preserved in the National Recording Registry by the Library of Congress in 2025. It's officially part of musical history.
A true modern classic.
Okay, so now we sort of transition from the sound to the vision, because her artistry, it really extended far beyond just the music itself.
Definitely. The look was just as important, wasn't it?
Absolutely. And critics lauded her ability to convey this full spectrum of emotion just with her voice. The BBC famously called her the preeminent vocal talent of her generation. High praise.
Let's talk about that voice a bit more specifically. It's described as a deep, expressive contralto, and critics really embraced her, quote, rugged charm, brash sense of humor, and distinctively soulful and jazzy vocals.
Yeah, she wasn't trying to be polished or perfect in that pop star way. She was trying to sound authentic, powerful, channeling an older style that felt raw, completely separate from the auto-tuned pop that was dominant at the time.
And that channeling, that vintage feel, it translated directly into her iconic presentation, her look.
Totally. Her style was deeply influenced by those 1960s soul girl groups, specifically the Ronettes.
You can see it so clearly.
Her look became defined by that massive beehive hairdo, which, the source notes, was actually a weave.
Ah, interesting detail.
Borrowed directly from the Ronettes' aesthetic, apparently via her hairdresser, Alex Foden. And of course, her dramatic, heavy, Cleopatra-style eyeliner and makeup.
And here's where it gets really interesting about the authenticity. The source mentions that the original Ronette, Ronnie Spector herself, was reportedly taken aback when she saw a photo of Winehouse. She momentarily thought it was a picture of herself from back in the day.
Wow, that's incredible. That shows it wasn't just simple imitation. It was this deeply studied, internalized homage. She embodied it.
Yeah.
And her fashion choices generally were like a masterclass in mixing influences, described as knowing collage.
A knowing collage. I like that.
She combined that classic vintage girl group look with touches of punk, like the look of Johnny Thunders, apparently.
Okay, interesting mix.
And the bold red lipstick and heavy eyeliner, the sources say she picked that up from Latinas she saw down in Miami.
Right, so it was this conscious creation of an unforgettable, instantly recognizable visual brand. She knew what she was doing.
Oh, absolutely. But this strong, distinct image, it collided so violently with her personal struggles. And this is where the media really created that dichotomous public image we mentioned.
Yeah. The narrative became undeniable critical success versus intense, very public personal turmoil.
Yes, and the media absolutely loved that contrast. The New Statesman called her a filthy-mouthed, down-to-earth diva, which sounds almost complimentary in its rawness.
Kind of, yeah.
But then Newsweek was much harsher, referring to her as a perfect storm of sex kitten, raw talent, and poor impulse control.
Ouch, that's brutal.
Brutal. They basically framed her entire existence as this sort of car crash you couldn't look away from.
And we see the absurdity of this duality play out in things like the awards circuit. In 2008, the same year she's sweeping the Grammys, she's nominated for Best Solo Artist at the NME Awards, celebrating her talent.
Right.
But she simultaneously gets awarded Worst Dressed Performer at the same ceremony and ranked #2 on Richard Blackwell's infamous 10 Worst Dressed Women list.
It's mad, isn't it? The industry just couldn't decide if she was a genius or a joke, or maybe both at the same time.
And this fracturing of her image, ironically, it served the bottom line, didn't it? Sadly, yes. Her record label even noted that the extensive, often really intrusive media coverage actually increased record sales. The public was consuming the drama right alongside the music.
Which raises that important question the sources themselves grapple with. The responsibility of the media in all this. BBC Radio Scotland actually held a debate on whether her lifestyle was truly newsworthy, suggesting the BBC, and media in general, were complicit in undermining celebrities.
That's a strong charge. Complicit.
Yeah. But you can see the argument. They were documenting the collapse while simultaneously fueling the environment that perhaps accelerated it.
The relentless focus on her looks, her intoxication, her missteps. It became just as much a part of her public image as the beehive itself. It must have been unbearable. Okay, so shifting more fully now to the personal side, the sources document a truly tumultuous and often very public relationship history, especially, of course, with Blake Fielder Civil, whom she married back in May 2007.
Yeah, that relationship seemed to define so much of that period. And volatile seems like an understatement. Toxic might be closer. I think that's fair. The honesty here, even from Winehouse herself in interviews, is pretty shocking sometimes.
Like what?
Well, she openly admitted that when she was drinking, she could be violent towards him, saying, quote, "If he says one thing I don't like, that I'll chin him."
Wow, that's direct.
Very.
Yeah.
And shortly after their marriage, they were famously photographed, bruised, and bloodied in the street after an alleged fight. Though she claimed her injuries were self-inflicted at the time, the lack of stability was immediately public.
And the drug use was heavily tied to that relationship, wasn't it?
Tragically, yes. The darkest detail probably comes from Fielder Civil himself, who publicly confessed years later to having introduced her to hard drugs, specifically crack cocaine and heroin.
He admitted that.
He did, yeah. The source material even mentions this devastating conversation they allegedly had during one of his prison visits, where they supposedly discussed cutting themselves to ease withdrawal symptoms. Just horrifying.
And Fielder Civil faced his own serious legal troubles during their marriage. He was jailed from 2008 to 2009 for grievous bodily harm and attempting to pervert the course of justice.
Right, related to paying off a pub landlord he'd assaulted.
And the source notes the prosecution argued that the payoff money actually came from Winehouse, although her father, Mitch, who managed her finances, publicly denied that specific claim. It was all just incredibly messy.
Incredibly messy. The marriage eventually ended, with the divorce finalized in August 2009. And Winehouse summarized the relationship very plainly, stating that her whole marriage was based on doing drugs.
God, that's an intense, tragic assessment of such a core relationship in her life.
It really is. Following this, she dated the film director Red Kravis right up until her death. And there were reports suggesting they planned to marry and have children.
Oh, really?
But then complicating that, there were also conflicting reports suggesting she discussed remarriage with Fielder Civil in that same year. So it seems her emotional ties were still quite complex.
It sounds incredibly complicated. And looking at her health struggles more broadly, the timeline is just deeply tragic. The sources point to heavy drinking, drug use, and significant weight loss starting around 2005.
Yeah, even before Back to Black fully exploded.
And her family, according to the sources, believed that the death of her grandmother, Cynthia, the same grandmother who connected her to Ronnie Scott in the jazz world.
Right, this singer.
That her death in mid-2006 might have triggered her addiction in earnest, like removing a key stabilizing figure in her life.
That's a powerful claim about a potential tipping point. Does the source material offer any, professional confirmation of that specific link, or is that primarily the family's perspective on the emotional turning point?
The sources mainly frame it as the family's narrative, their belief about the trigger,
Hmm.
but it certainly aligns chronologically with the escalation of her public spiral. Because by August 2007, she was hospitalized, following what was widely reported as an overdose of multiple drugs and alcohol. And it was around this period that she confessed, apparently to her doctors or therapists, problems with self-harm, depression, and also eating disorders.
Which all kind of culminated very publicly in January 2008 when that tabloid video surfaced. The one appearing to show her smoking crack cocaine.
Yeah, that video was everywhere. The international scrutiny was immediate and intense.
Even the UN drug chief criticized her alleged habits for sending a bad message, though her spokesperson immediately refuted that, saying, she was actively trying to get better.
And the source material clarifies a really crucial detail here, one that often gets overlooked in the broader narrative of just drugs killed Amy Winehouse.
What's that?
According to her physician, Dr. Christina Romette, Winehouse successfully quit illegal substances in 2008.
Right. That is such a critical milestone to note. She actually overcame heroin and crack cocaine addiction, which is huge.
Huge. But then, tragically, alcohol emerged as the dominant problem, essentially replacing the illegal drugs as the substance of choice.
So she swapped one addiction for another, basically.
It seems so. And furthermore, while she sought treatment for her immediate physical symptoms, doctors apparently recommended dialectical behavior therapy, DBT.
Ah, yes.
But she refused psychological therapy. Wait, just quickly, for listeners who might not be familiar, what exactly is dialectical behavior therapy? What does it involve?
Right. So DBT, it's a specialized type of cognitive behavioral therapy. It's primarily designed to help individuals who experience really intense emotions and struggle with managing high-risk behaviors, things like substance abuse, self-harm, suicidal thoughts.
Okay.
It teaches practical skills, things like mindfulness, how to regulate your emotions, how to tolerate distress without resorting to destructive behaviors, and also interpersonal effectiveness, like how to manage relationships better.
So her refusal of it suggests
What?
a resistance to maybe addressing the underlying root emotional causes of her addiction, even while she managed to conquer the illegal substance use.
That seems to be the implication in the source material, yes. A focus on the physical addiction without fully tackling the psychological drivers.
And meanwhile, her physical health was also clearly failing due to her lifestyle and addiction. Mitch Winehouse stated publicly she had signs of what could lead to early-stage emphysema.
From the smoking, presumably.
Yeah, with her lungs operating at only 70% capacity plus an irregular heartbeat, all attributed to her heavy chain smoking and, previously, the drug use.
And alongside all this, her encounters with the legal system were just constant. It really highlights the nonstop public scrutiny she was under. Let's try to get the timeline straight because it does get messy quickly.
Okay, yeah.
So 2007, she was arrested for cannabis possession in Bergen, Norway. Later dropped the appeal against the fine.
Right.
Then 2008, caution for common assault, slapping a man in the face. Arrested again for suspected drug possession following that video leak.
Right. But those charges were dropped, weren't they?
Yes, charges dropped eventually, due to lack of confirmation about what the substance actually was in the video.
And she had to deal with full court proceedings, too. She was found not guilty of common assault against a dancer in 2009.
Why was she found not guilty there?
Because the defense successfully argued the key witnesses were intoxicated themselves, and the medical evidence didn't actually support a forceful punch.
Ah, okay. Reasonable doubt.
But she did plead guilty later that year to assaulting a theater manager during a Christmas pantomime she disrupted, received a conditional discharge for that one. The chaos just seemed relentless.
It really does. And the constant invasive intrusion from the media, the paparazzi, it led to a significant action on her part. She actually obtained a court injunction against a leading paparazzi agency in 2009.
What did the injunction do?
It banned them from following her within 100 meters of her home. It feels like this final, maybe desperate attempt to carve out just a small zone of personal peace. A recognition that the chaos was actively hindering her ability to function, let alone create music.
Yeah, the sheer volume of legal chaos and personal struggle we've just outlined, it leads directly into the deceleration of her creative output, doesn't it?
It really does. The shift from the rapid, intense completion of Back to Black to those final years, it shows a dramatic slowdown.
She still did some things, though. She contributed that cover of Leslie Gore's It's My Party to a Quincy Jones tribute album in 2010.
Right.
And she mentioned learning to play drums for a third album, but that album was continually delayed. Her focus just seemed fractured by the addiction and everything else going on.
And we really see the effect of her problems play out dramatically on stage in those later years. Her performances became increasingly shaky, unpredictable, suggesting maybe a loss of that tight control that had defined her artistry earlier.
Yeah, like in 2009, a jazz festival gig was apparently marred by technical difficulties, downpours, but also her difficulty remembering lyrics.
And the international tours in 2011, just before the end, they paint a really difficult picture. A tour of Brazil saw her forgetting lyrics, leaving the stage for like 5 minutes at a time.
Oh, wow.
Though the crowd there was reportedly quite compassionate, seeming to recognize her struggles. But then a later performance in Dubai that led to booing. She apparently appeared tipsy and the show was cut short.
But the real breaking point, the performance everyone remembers from that time, was Belgrade in June 2011.
Ah, Belgrade, yeah.
Mm.
That was meant to be the opening night of her European tour, and local media just called it a scandal and disaster.
That actually happened.
She was apparently so intoxicated that she couldn't remember the city she was in, couldn't remember the lyrics, couldn't even remember the names of her own band members. She was just visibly unable to perform.
God, that's painful to even think about.
Yeah. She was booed off stage. And that led her management to cancel the entire rest of the tour so she could, quote, sort herself out. That performance felt like a very public acknowledgement that she could no longer manage her personal life alongside her professional obligations.
And then just 3 days before her death, on July 20th, 2011, she made her final public appearance. It was a surprise showing at the Camden Roundhouse.
Right, to support her goddaughter, Diane Bromfield, who was performing. A brief return to the stage, looking relatively well in photos from that night.
And her very last recording, that was the duet with Tony Bennett, wasn't it?
Yeah, a really soulful duet, Body and Soul, recorded earlier but released posthumously on his Duets, the second album. A lovely final piece of music.
And then the end came, so suddenly. On July 23rd, 2011, Amy Winehouse died at her home in Camden Square, aged 27, cementing her name, tragically, in that 27 Club narrative.
Joining icons like Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, Jim Morrison, Kurt Cobain, all died that same age. Such a waste.
The final moments, as detailed in the source material, they're just heartbreakingly contradictory, aren't they?
How so?
Well, her doctor, Dr. Ramit, had visited her the day before for a routine checkup and apparently noted no abnormalities regarding her substance use at that point. She seemed relatively stable.
Okay.
Yet later that same day, Amy called her doctor back to confess her codependency issues and spoke those desperate words, "I don't want to die."
Wow. That is just utterly devastating detail to emerge from the sources. That contradiction of wanting help, wanting to live, but being unable to stop the destructive pattern.
Exactly. And her bodyguard, Andrew Morris, who had been observing her, noted she was drinking moderately that evening, but said she was laughing, listening to music, and watching TV at 2 a.m. the day of her death. He found her unresponsive hours later, around 3 p.m.
And the initial speculation, of course, fueled by years of media sensationalism, immediately pointed towards a drug overdose.
Right. That was the assumption everywhere. But the toxicology reports definitively disprove this. They showed no illegal substances in her system at the time of death.
So it wasn't heroin or crack or anything like that?
No. The cause was far simpler and, in a way, more tragic. It was a massive relapse into excessive alcohol consumption after a period of abstinence.
The official coroner's report found her blood alcohol content was 416 milligrams per 100 milliliters.
Which is just astronomical. That's over 5 times the legal drink-drive limit in the UK.
Just a fatal level of alcohol. So the initial inquest and then a subsequent reopened inquest both ruled her death as death by misadventure, due to acute alcohol poisoning, concluding that she voluntarily consumed alcohol, a deliberate act that took an unexpected turn in that it caused her death.
But what's important to remember here, and it's a crucial piece of insight into maybe her physical state, is the belief of her older brother, Alex.
What did he believe?
He argued publicly that bulimia, the eating disorder she'd battled for years, was actually the primary factor that killed her.
How so? Bulimia killed her, not the alcohol.
His argument was that the eating disorder left her physically much weaker and more susceptible to the fatal effects of that acute alcohol poisoning. Her body just couldn't handle the shock.
And that's not just like an emotional statement from a grieving brother. There's some grounding for that.
Well, medically speaking, prolonged bulimia can cause severe electrolyte imbalances. It puts immense stress on the heart and kidneys. So when an already compromised system is hit with such an extreme level of alcohol.
The body just can't compensate. It drastically lowers the fatal dose threshold.
Exactly. So her long-standing struggle with the eating disorder was, in Alex's view at least, the underlying reason her body failed so quickly when faced with that massive amount of alcohol. It's a really important perspective, often lost in the died from drinking narrative.
That adds a whole other layer of tragedy to it, and posthumously, her influence just grew, didn't it?
Immediately. Her album Back to Black briefly became the UK's best-selling album of the 21st century in the weeks after her death. And she broke a Guinness World Record for the most songs by a woman simultaneously on the UK singles chart. 8 tracks appeared at once. It just showed the sudden, deep resonance her music had once she was gone.
It's interesting, though, because despite all the chaos surrounding her personal life, the sources show Winehouse wasn't just an artist. She was also an active businesswoman and, maybe surprisingly to some, a philanthropist.
Yeah, let's talk about the business side first. In 2008, her estimated fortune was around $10 million, though it apparently dropped to about $5 million by 2009.
Why the drop? Any reasons given?
Likely a combination of things: legal fees, lifestyle costs, and probably interrupted touring revenue due to canceled shows. But despite this, she still commanded massive fees for private gigs, like around $1 million each for singing at private parties.
£1 million for one party. Wow.
Yeah, including one famous one for the Russian oligarch Roman Abramovich.
And her entrepreneurial spirit, it led her to launch her own record label, didn't it? Lioness Records in 2009.
That's right, Lioness Records. The name itself feels significant, doesn't it? Reflecting her astrological sign, Leo, and that personal fierceness she had.
And the label's first signing was her own goddaughter, Dionne Bromfield, who was only 13 at the time.
Yeah, which shows she was actively trying to mentor and support the next generation of talent, even amidst her own struggles.
She also had that successful venture in the fashion world, the collaboration with Fred Perry.
Oh yeah, the clothing line. That was huge. A 17-piece vintage-inspired collection released in 2010. And Fred Perry confirmed she was deeply involved, apparently giving crucial input on proportion, color, and fit.
So it wasn't just her lending her name to it.
No, it sounds like she was really extending her meticulously curated 1960s style into a commercial line. It featured things like capri pants, a bowling dress, a trench coat, all very Amy.
And the success of that collaboration was such that even after her death, 3 more collections that she had already designed were released at her family's request. It really cemented her status as a style icon whose vision went beyond just the recording studio.
But beyond the business side, the source documents her quieter generosity, too.
Like what?
Well, she donated significant time and money to various children's charities. And she campaigned actively on local issues, like joining the effort to stop a block of flats being built near the George Tavern music venue in East London, trying to protect the local music scene.
And there's that particularly touching anecdote about her personal philanthropy.
Right.
During her long stay in St. Lucia in 2009.
Right.
She apparently secretly paid £4,000 for urgent, potentially life-saving surgery for a local Caribbean man, Julian Jean de Baptiste.
Secretly, so no publicity.
Exactly, an act done entirely without publicity, which maybe showcases a private side to her character that often went unmentioned in the tabloid frenzy.
There was also that highly publicized adoption controversy during that same St. Lucia stay, wasn't there?
Yeah, reports circulated everywhere that she was planning to adopt a 10-year-old local girl named Danica Augustine, with whom she'd clearly formed a really deep bond. But her representative ultimately denied the formal adoption claim, though the affection and the bond itself were undeniable.
But the most enduring business and philanthropic legacy surely has to be the Amy Winehouse Foundation, AWF.
Absolutely, which her family launched on what would have been her 28th birthday, September 14th, 2011, just weeks after her death.
And her older brother, Alex, the one who spoke about the bulimia link, he now works full-time for the organization, right?
That's right. And the mission is deeply personal, obviously, and very clear, to help vulnerable and disadvantaged young people, and specifically to prevent the tragic effects of drug and alcohol misuse, addressing the very issues that consumed her own life.
And they have concrete programs.
Yeah, they launched the Amy Winehouse Foundation Resilience Program for schools back in 2013. It focuses on drug, alcohol, and emotional health education in UK schools. Often working with people with lived experience, like Russell Brand, helped launch it to deliver the message more effectively.
So turning her tragedy into something positive for others.
Exactly. And beyond the foundation, her purely cultural impact is just staggering when you look back. Critics universally lauded her ability to convey that raw, complex emotion with her unique contralto voice.
Even Bob Dylan paid tribute, didn't he? Calling her the last real individualist around. High praise from Dylan.
Very high praise. And she influenced a whole generation of artists who emerged shortly after her. People like Adele, Lady Gaga, Bruno Mars, Sam Smith, Lana Del Rey, even Billie Eilish.
Wow, that's a huge list.
Yeah, they've all credited her in some way for paving the way, demonstrating that raw, classic soul and jazz could be commercially viable again in the modern era, provided it was delivered with that kind of uncompromising lyrical honesty she had.
And her story, it clearly continues to resonate. Through major projects like the Oscar-winning 2015 documentary Amy.
Which was controversial in some ways, but powerful.
Right. And the 2021 documentary Reclaiming Amy, which was narrated by her mother Janice and offered a different perspective, plus her parents' memoirs, and now the 2024 biopic Back to Black, all of it just testifies to the power of her tragically short career and her enduring presence in popular culture. Hashtag tag outro.
So when we try to synthesize all the knowledge from these sources, the portrait of Amy Winehouse that emerges is really one of a rapid, almost blindingly intense ascent. You have the foundational jazz mastery in Frank, then the revolutionary, traditional yet modern soul sound of Back to Black that took over the world, the creation of that absolutely indelible style.
Yeah.
And then the ultimate tragic collision of that genius with profound personal fragility and struggle.
And her success, it feels like it was predicated entirely on her honesty, wasn't it? Her autobiographical songwriting was just so raw. It captured the reality of her struggles, from the rehab refusal to the toxic relationships, with such power that it connected globally. She literally took her deepest pain and turned it into world-changing music.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener, trying to understand her? I think Winehouse's story is a profound illustration of how quickly and how thoroughly genius can emerge, but also just how fragile that boundary between artistic brilliance and self-destruction can be, especially when it's exacerbated by constant media intrusion and the disease of addiction.
And she's constantly viewed through that lens of the 27 Club. It's almost become shorthand for her story. But her legacy, particularly when you consider her brother Alex's assertion that bulimia was the hidden physical killer, it reminds us that the simple narrative of died from drugs or died from alcohol often misses the deeper, more complex battle she was fighting for years.
That's a really important point. So maybe this is the provocative thought to leave you with. If her ultimate contribution, beyond the timeless music, is the Amy Winehouse Foundation and its resilience program, if that work is dedicated to preventing the very issues that consumed her, helping vulnerable youth avoid those drug, alcohol, and emotional pitfalls, does that work have the potential to fundamentally change the narrative around the 27 Club?
How do you mean?
Well, could it turn what's often seen as just a tragic footnote in music history into a kind of launch pad for future generations? A catalyst for positive change born from tragedy?
That's a powerful idea.
And tied to that, what responsibility moving forward does the media now hold in chronicling the lives of talented but fragile artists? How can they do it without becoming complicit, as that BBC debate suggested, in their potential undoing? That, I think, is the lasting, provocative question her life and death leaves us grappling with.
A deeply thought-provoking end to what's been a challenging but I think really insightful deep dive. Thank you for joining us.